I freaking love hummus. It is the best. If you clicked on this video wanting to learn how to make a hummus platter, don't worry, I've got you. But before we can do that, there's so much more you need to know about hummus, including a little bit of the controversy behind hummus, a secret ingredient that if you're not adding to your hummus, I don't know why. We're gonna talk more about that and why you have to add lots of it. And finally, whether or not you need to use dried chickpeas or if it's okay to use canned chickpeas in order to get a silky, smooth hummus. So stay tuned for all of that. Or if you're here just to learn a little bit about the hummus platter, don't worry, you can skip to the end of the video or you can jump in the description below and click on the timestamps. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Jessica and here at Homebody Eats, we like to dig a little bit deeper into the recipes that we all know and love. So this video, as you may have already guessed, is all about hummus. We're gonna do a little bit of a deep dive into the behind the scenes as far as the history and a little bit more about the ingredients that we use in hummus. And don't forget that this hummus video also goes along with our hors d'oeuvres 101 series. And the goal of this series is to get you familiar with these little bite-sized appetizers so that way you can make hors d'oeuvres in your everyday life. Whether that's for a party that we can hopefully have in the near future or just for a small family get-together. Hors d'oeuvres are such a fun way to make food and have people really be excited about your fun presentation. So make sure to check out the video from last week to know a little bit more what I'm talking about. So let's start out by first talking about the history because it plays a pretty significant role in the dish that we all know and love today. So believe it or not, hummus is a little bit controversial. Despite the fact that so many countries are producers of chickpeas or garbanzo beans, one of the main ingredients in hummus, there is a little bit of a controversy as to who actually created the hummus dish that we know and love today. So let me back up a little bit. The first ever somewhat kind of hummus resembling recipe was made all the way back in 17th century BC in Mesopotamia. It wasn't until around the 15th century in the Ottoman Empire that the somewhat dish that resembles what we know as hummus today was created. The controversy comes in because we don't quite know which country or state made hummus and can kind of lay claims to it as their national dish. Lebanon, Israel, and the state of Pakistan all want to claim hummus as their national dish, but we really don't know who exactly made it. According to BBC, there's a lot of patriotism and identity that comes along with hummus. There's recently, in about 2008, been a hummus war, and this was when Lebanon accused Israel of stealing and profiting from their national dish. So ever since then, there's been a conflict as to who can really tout that hummus is their national dish and they can sell it and have the rights to it. This conflict, while obviously causing an identity crisis between many different countries, got to an extreme, so much so that both Lebanon and Israel tried to prove their allegiance to hummus and break a Guinness Book of World Records by building the largest plate of hummus. You have to check out these photos. I really wish I would have been there for this so I could try each of these hummuses. I mean, these plates were so big. One was 2 tons and another was 4 tons. They were massive. Obviously, that was a very brief history, so if you're interested in learning even more about hummus, I will link my blog post below. I have resources about all of the history and the culture behind hummus that you definitely need to check out and learn more. So let's move on to chat a little bit more about what actually goes into hummus. There are very few ingredients that you need for hummus, which is actually kind of the brilliant part about it. It's simple, yet it has a lot of flavor. One of the first things that we're gonna need are chickpeas or garbanzo beans. Now there's a little bit of a debate as to whether or not you need to use dried chickpeas and boil them to make them soft and use that for your hummus versus just doing it kind of the lazy way, going to the grocery store, grabbing a can of chickpeas that have already been boiled and they're ready to use. Because I'm crazy and I love trying things out, I had to go to the grocery store and try the whole process of boiling the chickpeas. Let me tell you, it took a long freaking time to do. And even though I love to cook, it was way too long for me. Like, I probably would never do it again just because, why? I already have a can, it's easy, and it's simple. But here's where the problem comes in with can. All of those skins that are on the chickpeas in the can kind of make the hummus a little bit lumpy. So a lot of people opt for individually peeling the skin off of the chickpea in order to make a really smooth hummus. That's also super time consuming, and I don't feel like we need to waste our time peeling all the chickpeas. It's just too much. But luckily for you, there's a little secret that you can do in order to A, get smooth hummus, and B, not spend so much time prepping the chickpeas. And that little secret is baking soda. All we have to do is boil the chickpeas along with half a teaspoon of baking soda, and it softens the skins on the outside and it makes them blend up super nice and super smooth. I'll show you that in a minute. Remember that secret ingredient I was talking about in hummus? Well, it's tahini. Now, most hummus actually does have tahini, but some hummuses don't have as much tahini as I would like. I recently have been digging into a book by Adina Sussman. It's her Sababa cookbook, and in her recipe she uses a ton of tahini. I was a little skeptical at first, especially because Americanized hummus it's not always full of tahini. That's not the prominent flavor. But I tried her recipe and I fell in love. So I knew that the recipe I created had to have a ton of tahini. If you're new to cooking and you maybe don't know what tahini is sesame seed paste. So they take sesames and grind them really smooth into a paste. Make sure that when you're using tahini in your hummus, you have a really high quality tahini. That's gonna obviously contribute to making sure that your hummus tastes really good and really fresh. If possible, I'd recommend stopping by an international grocery store and picking up something that's a little bit more authentic. However, if that's not an option to you, I will link a tahini that I have tried and like that you can purchase straight from Amazon and it can be shipped to you. All right, up next, we need some kind of acid in our hummus in order to balance out the rich, nutty flavor of the tahini. So you can either use lemon juice, or in this case, I'm using citric acid. Both of these will do the trick to get you a nice bite in the hummus. And of course, our last ingredient is olive oil. Olive oil always adds a decadent, rich flavor, and it really is nice to garnish the hummus with. In some recipes, you'll see the olive oil actually added in when you're mixing up your hummus in the food processor. But for this recipe, we're just gonna add some on top for a nice little touch. Now that you know a little bit more about the ingredients, we're gonna dive in and actually start making this hummus platter. All we need for this platter is one batch of hummus, and then we'll divide it out, add different toppings, and it's gonna look really pretty on a beautiful platter. First up, grab a large pot, and you'll wanna make sure that it is pretty large so that way your chickpeas don't boil over. Add your chickpeas and make sure that they're drained, and you're actually gonna reserve the liquid because we're gonna use that later. Along to the pot, in addition to the chickpeas, you'll add a half a teaspoon of baking soda, and then fill it up with water just to a couple inches above the chickpeas. Then place your pan over high heat, and once it comes to a boil, set a timer for 10 minutes. Once the timer goes off, check your chickpeas and make sure that they've increased in size slightly, softened up a little bit more, and most importantly, the skins are falling off. From here, drain your chickpeas and don't worry about getting all of those skins off. If they fall off, cool. If not, it's totally okay to throw them in the food processor. Once they're drained, add your chickpeas along with the reserved liquid from the can and your citric acid and kosher salt. From there, blend on high until everything is nice and smooth. Next up, we're going to use 2 cups of tahini, and I know that's a lot, but trust me on this, it's going to taste so good. As well as get yourself some ice cold water. We're going to alternate in the tahini and the ice water while blending the food processor on high speed until we get a nice, creamy, and smooth hummus. From there, you can test and, of course, always taste it to make sure that your seasoning is right. If necessary, you can add a little bit more salt. And then you're gonna plate up your hummus into 3 separate bowls. Now this is where the fun part is. We're also gonna prep some toppings. So we have 3 different toppings today. The first being some za'atar seasoning as well as crumbled feta. Up next we have an olive tapenade. And finally, a green herb dressing with pine nuts. Now feel free, if you wanna use your creativity, to do completely different toppings. They're totally optional, but for now, assemble all of those toppings, and don't forget all the instructions will be in that blog post as well. And you can kind of start to plate up your hummus by putting it on top and of course garnishing it with some olive oil. From here, grab your favorite kinds of dippers, whether that is some pita bread, crackers, or even some crudités. I love using radishes as well as cucumbers and carrots. And then have fun plating it up. One of the cool parts of this dish is seeing it all come together and having a really cool centerpiece with your hummus platter. I'm so obsessed with this hummus platter, probably because hummus is one of my favorite foods, but I hope that you enjoy it and have fun making it, especially now that you know a little bit more about the history of hummus and the chickpea. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of the video in our Hors d'oeuvres 101 series. And until then, I will see you in the next video.